Hey everybody, hope 2025 is treating you excellently so far. And also welcome to On the Defense. This is the show where we look at cybersecurity, finance, and really everything in between. So here at FSHR, we've just published our annual cybersecurity guide for CFOs. This year's edition looks at how leaders can think like a scammer and find criminal opportunities before the actual criminals do. So that's something we're really interested in at the moment. And as a result, I was very excited to talk to today's guest. This is somebody who knows exactly how to think that way. Former criminal hacker turned good guy, Bastien Treptel. Now, honestly, I went into this conversation hoping to hear Bastien's very unique and highly relevant perspective on adversarial thinking and red teaming, basically how to think like a hacker. But what I find really exciting about this discussion is that Bastien didn't just explain how business leaders can think like a hacker in order to defend their organizations. He also broke down how this mindset can help leaders take their businesses to more imaginative, innovative, and exciting places. It's a scary discussion, sure, but it's also a really inspiring one. So I hope you have a listen, and of course, stay safe out there. Bastien, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Shana. I appreciate it. Looking forward to chatting about all things scary. It's already been a pretty interesting 2025.
Yes, and I have so many questions about that, and I can't wait to get into it with you. But just for a bit of background, you started and ran a successful security consultancy control group for a long time. And I feel like a lot of people we've talked to from similar organizations, they often come from career backgrounds and things like law enforcement, intel, IT, et cetera. But my understanding is that you had a very different entry point to this industry. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm infamous for being the bad guy going good. So I'm an ex-criminal hacker. I regret nothing, but I definitely had an interesting entry. So I broke into one of the big four banks, which I'm now allowed to say which one. So I broke into the Commonwealth Bank, and they've been amazing, actually. So I've done events with them now. We did South by Southwest with CBA. So yeah, I broke into those guys. I stole 40,000 credit cards. I was pretty benign. So all I did was order pizza and pay for a bit of education. But that eventually led to my downfall. So I got so blasé with it. Like I was very young. So when I eventually got caught, you got to remember it was like 3 or 4 years after the initial crime. And I just had this endless supply of credit card numbers. I just assumed that there was some kind of infinite money glitch and people had completely forgotten about me. And I started ordering pizzas to my own home, which led to me getting obviously arrested. But look, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I got to meet some of the amazing people at the Australian Federal Police, and I now work with those guys. We now get to do some amazing programs where we help young hackers. Speaking of an entry point into the industry, we help young hackers who have maybe gone a little bit into the dark side like I did, but not quite as far. And we get them industry placements. We tell them about, a lot of them don't even know that some of their stuff is illegal. For example, some of them just for fun decide to hack into satellites, which awesome pastime, but is actually illegal. And in Australia can have a 15-year jail term attached to it.
Wow, that sounds really productive. And I'm also intrigued by the fact that you were undone by pizza. How old were you when that happened?
Well, I initially kind of got into the malicious activity when I was 14 years old, and pizza is still a big problem for me. Pizza, it can motivate me to do a whole bunch of things. But now I just mainly struggle with the late.
Awesome. So I feel like that's the perfect illustration of what you mentioned about someone shifting lanes and kind of using those hacking skills for lawful reasons rather than unlawful reasons. So I'm now seeing you in the more lawful good part of the quadrant, maybe. I'm not sure. And so that makes you pretty much the perfect person to explain terms like red team or red teaming. What is that exactly?
Yeah, well, I mean, how cool is our industry? Like someone like me who's just curious, can I get in? Which is essentially all I was as a teenager. Is it possible? Now you get to get paid to do that. So red teaming is essentially where an organization will pay us to get in by any means possible. So red teaming normally alludes that you can use your entire tool bag of goodies, and don't be tricked into thinking that cybersecurity is just, text, nerd development, coding. A lot of it now is, or most of it now even, is social engineering. So in the industry, we hire actors, because some of us nerdy people, you put us in a situation where we have to pretend that we're someone from accounting in a big organization. Everyone's asking us strange questions. We freak out, sweaty forehead, sweaty armpits, and we have a bit of a panic attack. You tell an actor, this is a gig, and you are Sophie from accounting and you've worked here for 3 years. The actors can just pull it off like that. So yeah, red teaming, we use a lot of social engineering. Generally, we're on site. So we're actually trying to break into the organization by being there physically, which means we're infinitely more successful. So to give you an idea, every time we've been paid for a red team exercise, whether it be a secure facility like a data center, militarized complex, corporate, we always get in because we have that. No matter what, we're going to get in. So is it social engineering? Is it a tool bag? So, whether it's a hack 5 kit or flipper zeros or software defined radios or Wi-Fi sniffers or RFID copiers, we'll figure out a way to get in, versus pen testing, which is usually testing an application or testing a system specifically. And that can often be a little bit more technical.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was just about to ask, what is the difference between that and pen testing? So I guess I'll also ask, we also hear terms like blue team or purple team. What is that and how is it different from red teaming?
Well, it's super exciting. So blue team get to fight the red team. So it's kind of like that awesome computer game mix up. But essentially a blue team protects and a red team attacks. So when we're doing red teaming, so there might be another organization that's trying to detect us. So obviously social engineering is really difficult to detect, but once we plant a device, maybe we connect it to a PC, maybe it's a keyboard logger, maybe it's a HID device, maybe it's an evil Wi-Fi device, whatever it may be, the blue team will deploy all these really cool gadgets, toys, software, processors, systems, even training people to detect that we're there.
Right. Okay. And I think sometimes when we say, blue team versus red team, or I don't know if people even use the terms like black hat versus white hat or anything. I don't know if that's a real thing. Is
Yeah,
it?
no, they still do, absolutely. And sorry, I didn't answer your purple team question.
Oh, yeah.
Purple's when you
Oh,
mix
I
the red and the blue.
okay. How does that work?
Well, you get a paint color brush, a red paint, blue paint. No, joking. So it often happens more in smaller organizations, smaller cybersecurity firms, and you'll have basically a mix of both.
Mm, okay. So it is what it sounds like. But I think sometimes these like really evoke a sense of like good guys versus bad guys and things like that. But what you described, when you're talking about your entry point to the industry, sounded like you were just a kid who was like interested in how things all fit together and work. How does that mindset of like, okay, how does this all come together? What are the inner workings of this? How does that then go into that more red team kind of adversarial thinking?
Well, I think there's something maybe a little bit wrong with me. I just have to know how things work. And it's been like that since I was a kid. If I see like a plastic part on a car, how is that made? Like, what is injection molding? What's plastic made from? It's made of petroleum products. How do you go from petrol to plastic? And it's not just relating to technology for me. I've made everything from model rocketry to making my own go-karts, and I've just always been passionate about how things work. And once you understand how things work, it starts to become pretty obvious that there's some holes in things that people have made. And that's where the red team and the adversarial part comes about it. So ultimately, our industry is about finding holes and then letting the people who look after those systems know there's a hole there. To give you an example, if we find a big hole, a big breach, a big way in, like let's say we can find a hole in Windows, and that allows us to remote into anyone's machine and turn on the camera, or even a vacuum cleaner. We've all got these smart robot vacuum cleaners at home. There's lots of vulnerabilities in IoT devices. If you're a white hat hacker, you will contact that organization and say, hey, there's a big hole, and you'll give them a period of time to fix it. And then you'll let the general public know so that way they can patch their devices. So it's powerful work. It's a double-edged sword. The nasty people out there, the hackers, and there's lots of different reasons people become hackers, whether it was like me for curiosity or financial gain. A lot of them live in very poor socioeconomic regions, countries. Like we've been to parts of Asia and seen some of these hacking centers, and they're quite advanced and they are fully financially motivated. They make like millions of dollars a week USD. They target countries like Australia more than other countries because we've got a she'll be right attitude. So it is that fight between good and bad. Definitely some of us feel the temptation of going to the dark side sometimes, but it's all about notifying the population. And I think we're starting to see a wake up in Australia, particularly now, where people are starting to take cybersecurity seriously, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's way more awareness around it the last few years than there were, let's say 10 years ago. And maybe this is a good opportunity as well, because a lot of what you describe sounds cool. Like, oh, like how do things work? And like, oh, yeah, I was just like paying for pizza in school and stuff. That sounds cool. So maybe it's a good opportunity for me to ask you, what is the message to, let's say, young hackers or people who have a similar mentality of like, oh, like, how does this work? How do I get in? What should they know about, let's say, the black hat approach versus the white hat approach? Like, what are the benefits of kind of staying on the end of lawfulness?
Yeah, I would say this to anyone who's listening to this right now, and if you've got kids. First of all, I'll start with a warning. When I did it, it was a long time ago. We won't mention how old I am, but there weren't these rules and laws around that there are today. And when I talk to the AFP now, if I'd done what I did in today's age, I would have ended up in jail.
Mm.
There is an actually quite a nice kid. His name's R Evil. He got picked up by the Australian Federal Police when he was about 14 years old. He was taken in basically, and a lovely fellow by the name of Alex Tilley, who heads up some of their the Australian Federal Police's call it red team, blue team facilities there, and trying to catch bad guys. Unfortunately, just didn't break through to R Evil, and he's now doing an extended period of time in a state penitentiary prison in California in America, and he's not going to get out till he's well into his 40s. And his parents had no idea.
Mm.
The parents were sitting like 3 feet away from him, and they were just like, oh wow, he's so clever. He's doing all this programming and dev stuff. And you can really fall into the trap of thinking, oh, your kids are playing Minecraft, your kids are playing Roblox, and there's nothing harmful about that. If you are a parent of a young child, get on there and have a look to see the messages and play with your kids, because we know there are active people recruiting clever kids out of Roblox, clever kids out of Minecraft, and they're recruiting them for hacking activities,
Mm.
and they show them how to make a bit of money. And all of a sudden, R Evil, for example, the reason he hacked was he was worried about his parents and he wanted to pay off their home because he knew they were struggling with a mortgage. So it's a heartbreaking story, and that's how it can go really bad. And it happens more often than you think. Not only the hacking side of things, but even like we've got sexual predators online in those games. And yeah, you need to be next to your child, not all the time, but at least a couple of times a week. But any kids who are thinking about hacking, I've made a living and I made a hell of a lot more money doing cybersecurity as a profession. And you get to do the same things, by the way. This is what's awesome, right? Like you literally get paid to hack into an organization, which is what you want to do, but you do it ethically, you do it legally. And it's such an amazing career. You get to meet these amazing people. The salaries in cybersecurity are some of the highest in Australia. We get paid similar to doctors and professionals and engineers. So cool. And you can pick so many different things. If you want to get into hacking, but you're a really good actor, but you don't have dev skills, there's a space for you. If you're really good people leadership management, we have positions for you. So whatever it is you want to be, that is a far better choice. Trust me, I've been where you're kind of looking over your shoulder. I've been in the position where the police come into your own home. It's embarrassing. It's pretty horrific to your parents. So yeah, come and join us in cybersecurity. Way safer, way more fun, pays you a hell of a lot more, and you don't have to leave the country at the end of the day.
Yeah. It sounds like you still get to do all that cool stuff. You still get
You
to ask
do.
cool questions without the risk of ending up in a prison or something.
And I still get goosebumps. It still scares me to this day. You rock up to an organization and you've got this persona, you've got this toolkit of stuff you need to deploy into the organization. You've had a round table, a discussion. What is this organization? What do they do? We look on LinkedIn, we find out all the information about the staff. It's really spy. You feel like you're a spy. You're knowing everything about the leaders in the organization, maybe the company that does the cleaning, maybe the third-party contractors, like the people who check the smoke machines, the electricians, the test and tag guys. At the end of the day, we've done a little research project on an organization, and then we go, okay, what's the best way for us to infiltrate that organization? And it's so cool getting a plan to actually come to fruition. And like I said, when we do red teaming, we always get in. And it's really cool, even at the end of the day, to report to the board and go, hey, you gave us these list of things we needed to get, and we got all of them. We got access to your data. We got administrative access to your organization. We could transfer money in and out of your organization. We could purport to be people who worked for you. We even got a job there. And they just sit there and go, crap. And that's a cool feeling. And then the other part of it is trying to help them with that. And it's a big job because it's constantly evolving. It's a constant challenge. And I still find it a little bit frustrating. Like I liaise with a whole bunch of boards in Australia, and the number one risk to business today is a big cyber breach. So I worked just recently with a big firm. I've got to be a bit careful so I don't allude to them, but they do a lot of big infrastructure projects in Australia. And they were kind of saying to me, well, we don't worry too much about cybersecurity because even if someone stole $100 million from us, it'd be annoying, but it's not the end of the world. And I just twisted the way of thinking when, okay, cool, but you've probably got a 5-year window of contracts you need to finish, in some cases 7 to 10. But if you have a massive cyber breach, and let's say a major road in Australia gets shut down for a week, or a tunnel has a big emergency and people are hurt, or trains have a derailment event. These are all things that can happen with the work in infrastructure. Do you think you're ever going to get a project ever again? Like when you go to bid, and that's what's important for cybersecurity for those guys. So every organization, cybersecurity is different. You've got to find out what it is. For an accounting firm, are you going to get any more clients if every single person you've released all their books, all their P&L sheets? Probably not. They're going to go to someone else. Look how badly PwC was affected by their, let's say, challenges with ethics when it comes to corporates and government jobs. So it can really knock billions off your balance sheet, and that's what's important for corporates, and that's why cybersecurity is so important. So when you go to a board and they say to you, well, we're not really going to take our number one risk seriously, I feel like that's almost embarrassing.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that is starting to maybe help people wake up to that risk and understand exactly how serious it is that feeling of dread, excitement, etc., when we talk about AI. And we've talked with you about AI before in one of our live events. I've heard you speaking about AI well before OpenAI and ChatGPT were in any of the discourse. How is that affecting things, particularly since you mentioned that this isn't always about the technical side of things? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's a mix of things, but there's also that social engineering, that more psychological component of things. With AI maybe lowering some of the technical barriers to things like cybercrime, what does that landscape look like today?
Yeah, and honestly, it's terrifying in a way. I love AI, by the way. Let me preface all this. I get really excited about some avenues about it, and I get really terrified in others. From a cybersecurity point of view, exactly like you said, it's enabling a whole bunch of people that maybe wouldn't have been able to do hacking before. It's reduced that barrier to entry massively. What those of us who do have the technical knowledge is we're essentially building up this army of agents. So I think I mentioned earlier that when we do an attack on an organization, the first part is research. That can now be done by agents. I can literally go and put a domain name or a company name in, and I can have this small army of agents, artificial intelligence agents, and it'll go and find out everything about that organization in the darkest holes of the deep web, the internet, the breaches, staff names, dogs' names, their location. For example, you might have seen the Volkswagen breach where we could look at the locations of all the different vehicles. So if you owned a Volkswagen, we could see that your car was parked at your house. All that information is out there, and I call it like footprints on the moon. It doesn't disappear once it's on the dark web. Agents can help us get that in seconds. I can get a one-pager on the entire leadership team of an organization. And when I go into boards and I throw the one-pager on each of them and they read what I found out about them in a matter of like 4 or 5 minutes, I've even done it live on stage. Yeah, it's a terrifying thing. So, that might have taken us 2 or 3 weeks of research before. So everything is now condensed, everything is now easier. And then from an attack point of view, organizations need to be so good at things like basic stuff like patching, two-factor authentication, because you've got an army of malicious AI out there that's constantly testing your perimeter, that's constantly making phone calls to your staff and finding weak points, that's sending SMSs, sending emails. And now that's just, if you look at the rise of attacks, it just goes up and up, and we're going to see a lot more.
Yeah. And kind of what you've already alluded to, there's this general sense of just massive acceleration. And so week to week, day to day, it feels like there's always something different to talk about. So it's a really timely conversation to be speaking to you because everybody right now, of course, is talking about DeepSeek. For those who aren't familiar with that, what is it and how is it impacting the general conversation around AI and security specifically?
Well, for me personally, it's very much impacting my wallet. So I think everyone who had some money in shares, particularly American shares, took a bit of a swan dive. But look, DeepSeek, there's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of hearsay. It's a brilliant leap forward in how we train artificial intelligence. So it's a Chinese-made artificial intelligence that's completely open source. So the fact that it's open source means that we can trust it. We can go through the code line by line and make sure it's not like the American government is accusing TikTok at the moment, like sending information. You can download this thing, you can run it on your own machines. And the real breakthrough was how they trained it. So if you look at an open AI, they basically spend hundreds of millions of dollars to train something like their new model, like GPT. So 0.1, 0.4, so it's 4.0 is these models that have just taken so much data, so much information. The breakthrough for DeepSeek is that they basically think of them as father and grandfather, mother and grandmother AIs to teach a smaller model. And it's very efficient. It cost them, if you believe the rumors, $6 million to train this model, which is orders of magnitude less. But the downside of it is it takes a hell of a lot more compute. So we've already gone and downloaded this and installed it on some of our servers. When you normally talk to OpenAI, it's almost it's as fast as a human with its reply. It can code way faster than a human, can write essays faster than a human. This thing with the GPUs that we've got is kind of like one word, wait 10 minutes, another word. So the compute power is a lot higher. So it's probably not the huge hype that everyone's talking about, but it is a breakthrough in training.
Right. And how, and apologies if this is an ignorant question, but how might that eventually interact with something like quantum computing, particularly where China might be investing quite a lot in those advances? How would these things interact?
Yeah, like I'll try and move away from the hype, but what we don't really know is what will happen when you run an LLM on large language model on a quantum computer. Some theorize that it will be very much like human intelligence, or some theorize it will be what we call super intelligence. A lot of people argue that we've already got AGI, and maybe we do, maybe we don't. But I guess my point being, if you throw back to like the Alan Turing days and the Turing test, it was always, can this thing convince you that it's a human? And I think AI is already there.
Mm.
Can it code better than most humans? I would say AI is already there. Can it solve maths better than a human? Probably not at the moment. I mean, did you see the latest test in AI where essentially it's only managed to get like 15 to 20% on a test that is literally designed to trick an AI, and none of the questions exist on the internet. So a group of very intelligent people have gone, what questions can we ask that there is no answer for it on the internet? And recently, the new model of OpenAI got, I think, 85%. The highest the humans ever got was like 88%. And that is like our genius level humans. So I think personally, we're already pretty damn close to AGI. A lot of people will argue against me on that one because it's not an intelligence like we are an intelligence. It's a different type of intelligence. It's like, what's the next word? What's the most likely next word? What is this person actually trying to get? And it's mathematical rewards. Super fascinating stuff if you ever want to dive into like tokenization, how neural nets work. You can download it yourself if you're curious, like PyTorch, for example. You can do all these cool neural nets. They'll be pretty dumb, like goldfish level dumb, but it's still cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very like definitely like uncertain, like kind of frightening, but also a little bit reassuring to hear there are at least like some limitations and we may already be at a point where this is something that we cannot control. But I think in the meantime, like to bring it back to like, I don't know, like business as usual, there's just so many reasons to be worried about how these advances are going to be used in malicious ways, particularly since a lot of legitimate organizations are their hands are tied by, you know, maybe their legal team is limiting what they can use and what they can access and things like that. Whereas when you're talking about like a criminal syndicate, for instance, they're not bound by any of those things. So they can kind of just push things and kind of use the most cutting edge version of things. And that is like a very daunting prospect, I think, for a lot of business leaders. And particularly when we're talking about business leaders, maybe in finance or AP or something, these are people who often by necessity have to focus on coloring within the lines, regulations, compliance, et cetera. How can they, short of, part of the answer might be that they hire specialists like yourself to go in and they hire a red team. But how can they maybe cultivate a bit more of that adversarial thinking where they're not just going, okay, I've got these defenses in place. They're a little bit more able to look for those holes that you mentioned. How can they kind of cultivate that sort of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. Attackers, hackers, scammers are using AI at a far quicker uptake than organizations because you're right, they've got no legal rules. I mean, they're obviously by definition breaking the law just by operating. And it's been incredible their use of AI, not just AI, like in an organization, like if I'm just starting up a new business at the moment to literally educate people around cybersecurity, get them partnered up with an AI mentor that knows more about them and their job than they do and helping the human. So you put the human and the AI together. I have to be careful of these regulatory requirements, like what's okay, what's not okay. But I think it's just starting for organizations, not even just in cyber. Like we know that AI can greatly assist with the reduction of an attack surface. So this might not sound too comfortable, but my new concept is we need to pair a human with an AI because an AI, when you're on a phone call, can quickly track where that phone call came from. Did it come from overseas? Is it a recognized number? This is where people get uncomfortable. They can listen to saying, okay, this is Shana talking to me right now. And an AI can literally be flashing a red light saying, hey, that looks like it's a digital version of the real you. And the phone number's not right. And we've never spoken to someone on a Teams email address. If you look at attacks retrospectively, there's lots of what we call indicators of compromise. And an AI is brilliant at seeing that. You know that your company is not allowed to, the directive is you can't give your password over the phone. But the IT department, in quotes, is saying, I need it. And then AI will go, no, don't say that, please. So whether people get comfortable in the future of AI listening to our phone calls and making sure we don't do whoopsies or even SMSs and emails and things like that is a pretty powerful sector. Leaders need to really think about how to use AI. And the message that I give to the boards and leaders of today's businesses is if you do the easy thing, right, which is to use robotic process automation and AI to replace your workforce. And I've seen this happen a lot, sadly. But in the tech sector in America, we're losing some 50,000 jobs a month in America, even though we're seeing strong jobs figures in other areas, which is great. But if you delete your workforce and you replace it with an AI workforce, it'll stay stagnant. It'll be a fossil of what your business once was. And it may reduce your bottom line and you may get increased sales and then you may be less likely to have cyber attacks. And they're all good and positive things. But the innovators of today, this is a powerful message for them. The innovators of today will pair AI and humans so that the human's job will be to imagine, how can I better service my clients? How can I improve my services? What can I imagine to be cooler, better, faster? What does the tomorrow business need? And those businesses, with the help of AI, will iterate so quickly that they'll leave those fossils behind. And those fossils will exist for 2 to 5 years and be gone.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. So I think I at least haven't heard quite as much of that messaging around. It really is kind of it's almost a short term, it's more of a myopic way of seeing where your business can go. And it makes sense if what we're talking about is AI being really good at looking at existing data sets, but then imagining things outside of those data sets might be where we still need the human thinking. So I think that's a really powerful and interesting kind of way of looking at it, is that's a little bit of a short-term, I guess, approach to just kind of replace everything with AI. But as far as, we've talked about what leaders can do to kind of bolster their defenses, encourage innovation, and kind of get the best of both worlds. But my understanding is that there's definitely been a lot of organizations who've recently had a breach or they've had money stolen because of AI that already exists that's being used for malicious purposes. Do you know of any of those incidents that have happened recently that you thought were, I guess, a good illustration of where we're at now?
Yeah, I mean, there's been already this year, what's it called? Secure Medi or MediSecure, I can't remember the business. Obviously, Volkswagen. There's a whole bunch of them. There's been four major ones, I believe, in Australia this year that have used some kind of social engineering and social engineering that is leveraging off AI and particularly deep fakes are getting huge. So if anyone doesn't know what a deep fake, we can very accurately now copy someone's face, someone's voice, and make real-time phone calls. So imagine I've already broken into your email system, which is called business email compromise, one of the most common hacks into an organization. I've written some code so it's not detected by any of your endpoint detection and response systems. So I know that you've got an acquisition and a merger happening. I know all about your financial systems. I know your clients. I know invoices. I know outgoings, P&Ls. And then I ring up and I pretend to be a CFO. And I sound like the CFO. I look like the CFO. We can have a Teams meeting even. I can even often find out what the background of an office looks like. I know the lingo. It is a powerful tool to trick people. And we see it not only in business, but in politics. We've even got some politicians now in America literally using deep fakes to amplify their efforts. So instead of them talking at one conference, they're talking at 30 at the same time on a big screen. And yeah, there's absolutely a lot of malicious activity going on. There's some really scary tools. We've got some really cool agents, and they essentially go onto breach forums and pretend to be people, and they essentially pretend to be dark black hats or grey hats, and they make relationships with this community of people on the dark web. And then we get to find out what people are doing in the wild, like which companies they're going after, what databases they're selling, and things like that. And their use of AI is pretty terrifying. And some of the software tools that I hear about on those breach forums. So basically, my AI reports each day to me what it's heard, scary things that are happening because of the rapid iteration thanks to AI, things like that can breach email accounts, things that can replicate the leadership team, cut the leadership team off, even break into phone systems. Yeah, I don't think the Australian businesses are ready for some of the onslaught that's going to happen. It's going to be a little bit too easy. And there's a war between the good guys and the bad guys. And there's probably going to be a period over the next 6 to 12 months where the bad guys have a significant advantage.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important to highlight because for a little while, it felt like there was a period where when we talked about deep fakes and voice conversion and stuff, it was like initially it was very scary, but then everybody kind of went, okay, well, we've seen some deep fakes that are not particularly convincing. Like maybe the technology is not actually there yet. And this is not something that this is a little bit more Black Mirror-y, and we're not actually too concerned about this in our day to day. But what you're saying sounds like we actually, we're a little bit more there than I think a lot of people are imagining. Is that
Well,
correct?
I've been to conferences recently where people with very little technical knowledge have cloned their CEO, and the CEO gets up on the big screen and makes a big announcement to the staff, and something's, not quite right about the messaging, but he looks real, he sounds real. And the staff were asked afterwards, at what point did you realize it wasn't your CEO? It was only when he said something really goofy. Um, that was obviously not true, but looks wise, sound wise, and this has been done by some people in the HR department that have very little technical knowledge. So, things like 11 Labs can do some amazing, very no code required voice, what do you call it, transcoding. Same with the video. You can now upload, let's say, half an hour of your CEO or your CFO's video footage, and it'll come back and be pretty damn convincing. Yeah, I'd say we're there on the deep fakes at a retail kind of level.
Mm.
And now the hackers of the world are just thinking how to use this to best take you out. And if you look at the Verizon reports that came out, mostly hacking is still relating to finance. So those of you in the finance departments, you are a major target. They're all financially motivated. There is obviously some state-based hacking and things like that, but the main likelihood for an Australian organization is to be targeted for either reputation or money. And
Right.
the tool set that hackers have now, I would start to take that pretty seriously. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? Like it's pretty easy to break a kill chain. So for a hack to be successful, it's like the same thing when you look at an airline disaster. we call it the Swiss cheese model. All the holes kind of have to line up. You have to have someone slightly vulnerable that might not be quite cyber aware, that accidentally doesn't follow company policy, that has some breaches online. Those things have to line up. And if you, for example, with a deep fake, you get some instruction to do something, a simple company policy to call back on a number that you know is real means that the hacker has to go one step further. If you want that hack to work, now I've got to hack the mobile phone. And when you call this person, I've got to divert it to another number, which is a far higher level of sophistication than most hacking groups do right now, which is why I'm saying I'm scared, because they're talking about hacks like that. Mobile phone diversion, landline diversion is within their wheelhouse now, but not for everyone, only for the high level guys, which means that attack vector would still work. But most companies, when they're hacked, luckily for us, it's so profitable still to use basic hacking techniques. Phishing now, why is phishing still a problem? It does my absolute head in. Like, how hard is it not to click on a link? It doesn't seem that difficult. We've actually built some cool new software. We just got a patent for it last Friday, where we're just going to remove links from emails and replace it with a code that a plugin checks. There's some great competitors to us that already have a similar product, and they call it URL defense. But yeah, like, why isn't this just already out there? And that's why hackers, luckily for us, haven't had to innovate too much, because they're still making billions of dollars doing the old send some ransomware by a link, and someone in an organization of 1,000 people will click on it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of also goes back to like some really, I guess, outmoded ways of thinking about scams and cybercrime, which is that people assume that the grammar is going to be really poor and there's going to be a bunch of typos and things aren't going to look quite right, whereas they don't understand that it's actually not particularly sophisticated to maybe intercept like an existing communication chain with somebody that you do trust. And then if you're already in, let's say, an email chain with somebody that you know, who you've met, who it's the same email address, and then they send you a link, you don't even think twice. Well, you would probably think twice, but a lot of people don't think twice. They just go, oh, this is a trusted contact, and they just continue on with their day. Whereas what it sounds like you're saying is that we just have to regard certain channels, that is most channels, as they can be compromised and they can't always just be trusted on their face.
Yeah, exactly. So that, I mean, one of the products we made, I think I alluded to it, will literally verify that the emails come from that person. It hasn't been tampered with in transit. It'll tell you the name, it'll tell you the original link. And then even if you do click on the link, it goes out through a safe check to make sure that it's not doing weird things. But where we in the industry are working to solve those problems, because it clearly isn't working, telling people not to click on links, it just doesn't. In fact, I've had an example of doing cyber training and awareness with an organization, and they actually had a higher click-through rate on the phishing test afterwards. I'm like, okay, we need to think of a better way, because training isn't working.
Yeah, wow. Well, it sounds like there's some reasons to be pretty scared, but there's also some reasons to be hopeful and to actually do something and take certain proactive steps. And I think, you know, you have quite a lot of information that you put out to keep people kind of aware of what's going on, because so much of this changes and evolves on a day-to-day basis. For audiences who want to hear more from you and learn more about this, where can they find you? Where should they follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Sadly, we've been a little bit banned because Meta and Instagram, they have bots essentially managing, who can post on their organization. So look, you can find me on TikTok, you can find me on LinkedIn. I know a lot of people aren't comfortable with TikTok. In fact, I've even told a lot of people that TikTok isn't that safe or great. But yeah, LinkedIn is a good one. We post all our videos out there. I deal with all the major speaking agencies for speaking at gigs. So that's a really powerful way to get the message out. I liaise with a whole bunch of boards. We're releasing content all the time. We've also just launched a new business called ironcladid.com. So you can go and check that out. That's got all the videos and training tools. I want to end on a message of hope, because it does, I feel like sometimes when we talk, it's all doom and gloom.
Mm.
What a stupidly exciting time to be alive. Like, if you are a leader in a business, if you work in finance, if you're a lawyer, anything that you've ever thought of that would be a great idea, and it's just been too hard, whether it's you don't know how to code, or you don't know the maths involved, or you're just, maybe you don't have the resources. Now with AI, you can have your own team of 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 agents for less than a cup of coffee a day, and they can help you create whatever comes into your mind. And the speed that you can create these things is just amazing. Like, it's giving me goosebumps right now. Like, we came up with these solutions to email. We came up with this solution to training. I want everyone to have an AI mentor to teach them about cybersecurity. And that app would have taken months, if not years, to develop. with a small team, we developed that in like 3 months.
Wow. Yeah, that is so exciting. I mean, yeah, we often hear so much about the terrifying side of this, but it just sounds like there's also just so much opportunity.
Yeah, put the fear aside. Obviously, address our leadership teams of the world, of Australia, address the risks. That's what your job is at a board level as a leader. Um, but also put your imagination hat on and let's do some cool stuff. Let's see some companies in Australia innovate and become a leader. Like we used to be a leader in research and development in science, and sadly, a lot of our talents disappeared overseas. But now we have the opportunity to bring that back in house, really become a powerhouse, and see some amazing Australian companies take over the world.
Yeah, awesome. And that's, I think, the positive kind of, I guess, side of that thinking that sometimes, we were talking earlier about adversarial thinking. This is I guess, the positive side of that. Obviously, adversarial thinking can be applied in positive ways, but this is that kind of thinking that goes maybe a little bit further than looking at holes and that sort of stuff, but it's looking outside the existing box and kind of seeing the opportunities rather than what's just there in front of you right now. And I think that is a rare, hopeful message about AI.
Yeah, and I mean, hacking has a bad connotation to the name, but if you really look at the meaning of the word hacker, it is to someone that looks at a system and changes it, and it can be changed for good. Like if everyone puts their hacking hat on and goes, "Hey, how could I make my role better? How could I make what I do more efficient? How could I have more fun doing it?" That is hacking your own life. So yeah, in a positive way.
That's awesome. Well, Bastien, thank you so much. I'll include some of the links you mentioned in the show notes. And yeah, have an amazing time with your army of AI agents.
Yeah, they're my new best friends. I love it.
All right. Thanks so much, Bastien.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for listening to the latest episode of On the Defense. If you'd like to find out more about F-Shore, you can follow us on LinkedIn or head to www.fshore.com. Thanks again.